17 questions with Bocce. 17 questions with Bocce.
All right, welcome folks to the 17 Questions with Bocce, episode 4 with special guest, Dedicated Yapper. And I am so excited. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited for you to be here. When I stumbled onto, the For You page, great with you, I was like, oh my word, I love your takes. I love how you communicate. And so I'm like, this person, I need to have her join me on 17 Questions with Bocce. And usually I have these things on Fridays that I drop. I said, I'm going to do a special episode because I just want to bring Dedicated Yapper in and just do a special Tuesday version, which is when I will be uploading this video. So where can people find you if they want to find you and follow you right now?
Dedicated Yapper on TikTok. Right now, that is my only sort of platform. I don't know if I'm gonna create a YouTube, so it's just at Dedicated Yapper on
And
TikTok.
I am trying to convince a Dedicated Yapper to consider it because I mean, honestly, great content. And so hopefully you'll consider it. But I understand, like sometimes you just want to do one platform at a time.
I
So
have considered it. It's just I haven't committed yet. So, but because I have so many thoughts on so many things outside of just this case. So we'll see.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure people will be down for it. So one of my bocce besties, Julesy, said that she would also love some personal background. But I'm like, whatever your comfort level is, that is what we're going with because it can get wild here in the wild, wild west of the internet. So whatever that means for you.
Okay. Well, I can just talk about my name. Like, so I came up with this name, Dedicated Yapper, just because I like sort of yapping on the internet, and I have so many thoughts about so many things, and most people in my personal life do not care about all of the things that I care about, and so TikTok just offers a platform to discuss it. Um, yeah, I sort of do want to be vague because I don't want to be too
No,
involved, but I
I
do have
know
a life
people
and
like
career outside of this.
investigating.
Yeah, I do have a life and career outside of this, though.
Okay, no problem. So what made you decide to start creating content about the Blake Lively versus Wayfair case?
I've had so many thoughts about this case from the beginning, and yeah, like, and I appreciate TikTok as a space to just share thoughts, and I've learned so much from other content creators on the app, in my perspective shift based off of other content creators, and so I like the engagement of sharing ideas and seeing other people's, like, either expand on it or even push back against it, and then strengthening my own perspectives, and so it's, like, such a great place to do that in some ways, but then other ways it's like very hard to have nuanced conversations. So you sort of have to take the good with the bad. But for the Blake Lively Justin Baldoni case in particular, I think the thing that stood out to me when the case was first starting was just how simplified people were bringing it down to just
Mm.
a case of gender, of like this rich white man versus this rich white woman. And because Justin Baldoni was a man, like he automatically had power over Blake Lively, and there was no other nuance on it. That frustrated me from the very beginning. And I had thoughts, especially in seeing people compare it to like the Amber Heard Johnny Depp case, or other cases of like violence against women. So I had thoughts from the beginning, but I did want to like let it play out a little bit because I do feel like it's a very nuanced topic to discuss, especially when there's allegations of violence or harassing behavior against women. I think it's important to sort of be tempered in reactions. But I think the power dynamics and just the allegations in general um, were what brought me to the case to begin with. And then just having my own thoughts and stuff, and realizing some of the thoughts I had not seen people necessarily articulate. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to add my 2 cents.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. I will say too, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole because we could easily go down that rabbit hole. People would always bring up the whole Amber Heard Johnny Depp situation, whatever, and I was like, why do people do that? I don't think it's at all the same. It doesn't have the same dynamics at all. But then I realized it's because of Blake Lively. Um,
Oh,
it was because they tried to make Melissa Nathan a thing. And Melissa
oh,
Nathan was involved with the Amber Heard Johnny Depp case.
Oh,
It was
okay.
written in the New York Times. I
Yeah.
was forever going, "Why do people keep bringing up this case?"
Okay.
It's not the same in my mind, at least. I know it's
Yeah.
not the same f it's the same way that when people talk about Meghan Markle and
Mhm.
say that it's the same as Blake Lively, and I don't see that comparison
No.
whatsoever. So I'm like, and so people in my comment section, I know you're gonna say, I do think that and I understand that, but I'm just being honest that I've never understood the comparison of either of those things,
Mhm.
but then I finally understood when somebody commented about, like, about the fact that they're the ones who brought it up first in the New York Times, and it's like, "Oh, you're right."
That's interesting. Okay. I think that makes sense. I do definitely think that there's also a projection of this idea of automatically encapsulating all women who are victims of or of any type of assault, violence, harassment, whatever, and automatically grouping them together as victims, and then whoever their alleged abuser is, automatically grouping them as perpetrators. And so I feel like that also fits a theme in general. But I do think the Melissa Nathan piece is interesting, and I had not thought about that.
Yeah, I was so thankful when somebody in my comment section, or maybe it was during one of my lives, had brought that up, and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, thank you for the reminder that there is this other aspect," because to me, I guess I always felt the retaliation piece was more important to Blake
Oh
Lively,
yeah,
but to me, the
absolutely.
sexual harassment was, you
Yeah,
know? So, because I think
yeah.
that's
Yeah, my take on it is that Blake Lively does not care about the sexual harassment piece at all, actually. I think
yeah,
she only cares about the retaliation. I think we see that in the damages she requested, because I think for sexual harassment, the damages was like $200,000, but she was requesting almost like $500 million for retaliation, for her businesses not performing as well as she thought they were, all of these other things that had nothing to do with sexual harassment. But she knew, because that's the other thing. My other perspective is that nobody would care about this case for real if she had not led alleged sexual harassment. If Blake Lively was just trying to take it to, well, she couldn't take it to court at all if she had not alleged that she was being retaliated against for engaging in protected activity, and that protected activity is that she complained about sexual harassment. If the sexual harassment was not part of this case at all, this would just be a disagreement between two rich white people who are smearing each other with PR, and nobody would care. And I think that is the other piece that's fascinating to me, because because so many takes, especially from the pro Lively side, is the focus on sexual harassment. Oh, I don't care that he took over the movie because he was sexually harassing her. I don't care about any other aspect of this case because of the sexual harassment, which is why I harp so much on, like, I don't believe that she was sexually harassed, nor do I think she cares, nor do I think she really thinks she was sexually harassed. She just needed something to have so she could get some type of revenge against Justin Baldoni, because she did not like the way that her name was being dragged through the mud based off of her own actions promoting the film.
yeah, and I will say for someone who was sexually harassed, what was the wildest to me is like the text message on like December 28 or 27, I can't remember exactly the
Mhm.
specific date on 2023, when she was asking him to come to he could come. I would be happy to have just you
Right.
to the January 4th meeting. And
Right.
just as like the audacity of this person. You think I'm stupid? And I'm so glad that, like, all of them went, but then
Mhm.
obviously the theatrics of Ryan Reynolds,
Yeah.
happened, but anyways, oh, I'm already veering off. I tell you, I am so like, fascinated by you that I get to start talking, I'm like, "No, there's actually other
Question.
questions to ask." But what lens or perspective do you bring to this case that shapes how you talk about it?
Well, definitely the lens of being a Black woman, and also engaging a lot in Black feminist theory. Like, I've taken Black feminist theory classes. I went to a school that was like all women, and we discussed feminist theory a lot, and specifically the comparing and contrasting between like Black feminist theory or womanism and like white feminism. Like that intrinsically is there. And but then also my own experiences of identifying as a Black feminist, and then having to justify this to other Black people, um, especially to like Black men or like older Black people, where it's like feminism is very much thought of as something like meant to separate Black men and Black women. And so it's already contentious. Um, and so I bring that for sure in how I think about dynamics, but I also bring my own experiences in dealing with like white women in general, like whether it was like teachers or like mostly teachers and stuff growing up. But it's like there's so many interesting dynamics. But I think like on TikTok, I remember a while ago there was some discussion of like white women on TikTok were making videos about their own relationships with each other, and their own friendships and like the level of sort of passive aggressiveness, or how conflicts are not handled and stuff like that. And I didn't chime into that question or into that conversation because obviously I'm not a white woman, but I did find it fascinating in thinking about how even white women, I've listened to white women describe their own relationship dynamics and seeing how that is showing up in this case with Blake
Mm.
Lively and in her behavior. Like the text messages between Taylor Swift and Blake Lively are so fascinating to me. Like when Taylor Swift was basically saying, yeah, like he can't, like his misogyny doesn't allow him to see that women can play chess or whatnot. And it's like, he's not playing a game. He's trying to he's trying to film a movie. And so the historical lens of like white women's self victimhood, despite the times in which that they have power, and have power over other people, but like still like lying within that victimhood and contrasting that with the experiences of Black women who've never been able to be victims, who constantly like we have to fight and advocate for ourselves. So it's just such a contrast seeing my own experience, the experiences of the Black women I know, of my friends in my life, and comparing it to the like text messages and behaviors of this wealthy white woman who has all of these resources and all of this access and is acting as if she doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much there, and it's actually one of the first things that drew me to your content was the lived experience, the expertise, the education around like what you know and how you bring it in a very accessible way, I would say, for folks to consume. And so I really appreciate that. And I know just even within my own line of work that there is like a body tension that happens to folks whenever race is brought up. Why
Yeah.
do we have to talk about race? And and we're going to get to that. I would love to have you unpack that a little bit more. I have a few more questions before that, but I do think that for folks that are watching this, if there is some body reaction to you, just even hearing this
Mhm.
conversation, I hope you are able to find ways to settle and push through and consider something that maybe not you might not be comfortable
Mhm.
considering, but it's necessary. Just having these conversations, it's rich when people allow it to happen.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think people inject more or personalize things to the
Mhm.
point that people can't hear the
Yes.
value of the
Yes.
conversation that's being had. So I just want to encourage folks, if you're in the space and you're watching this video right now and you're just like, do I want to push forward? I hope you do. I do
Yes.
hope you do.
I agree.
So when people tell you that your content resonates with them, what do you think they're connecting with most?
Um, I guess the sort of authenticity of it, I don't know, and maybe me bringing up different perspectives, like, because sometimes it's hard for me to realize when I'm saying something that is, like, interesting or new to people, because it's like I'm sort of repeating stuff that feels obvious, but sometimes it's not obvious, and so I think the lack of obviousness, I do think that I do sort of get the sense that some people, like, appreciate hearing, the perspective of a Black woman talking about this, especially because I do try to be sort of nuanced in my takes, especially bringing in nuance or some level of theory. It's not like I haven't really made any references to academic theory in any of my posts, but it is at the background of it. So I do think like the racial lens, like the Black womanness of it, I feel like some people find that fascinating. Um, but I think just the authenticity of it, and yeah, and I think I do show, like, a willingness to engage with people who disagree with me, but I try to be honest in my engagement. Like, I'm not gonna just post something not knowing post evidence and be like, say it says something that it doesn't say or that sort of thing.
You want your evidence to match what's coming out of your mouth.
Yeah. And I guess like a more personal thing is that I do come from an academic background. Like I have a PhD, not in a topic at all related to this, but coming from a place of academic rigor in which you have to defend like or your perspective and opinion to other academics, to people who are experts in the field, like that does lend a higher level of credibility. And I do bring that into my takes as far as trying to be as so it's like differentiating between what's my opinion versus what there's sort of evidence to support, I think is important. Um, but yeah, so having somewhat like, I don't know, I feel like I'm just yapping on the internet. Like I haven't said or produced a video that I'm like, oh yeah, this could get published somewhere, but it isn't back in my mind.
I will say, right, when folks understand the education, like the education that folks have, right? The
Mhm.
ability to make it accessible to folks is a
Mm.
huge thing, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Because it shows folks, I understand this enough to put it in a way that you'll be able to grasp it. There's all of this stuff that's
Mhm.
informing it,
Mhm.
but when I communicate it to you, it's in a way that you can take it because it feels like, oh, okay, you're processing all this like
Mhm.
knowledge, and yet it's in a very I wouldn't say it's necessarily have to be palatable because I don't know necessarily like that word because
Mhm.
sometimes it makes it sound like it's watered down.
Yeah.
Don't mean that.
It's
Maybe
accessible.
accessible really is
Yeah.
more the word I prefer, which is you make it available to everybody, no
Mhm.
matter what. And so I when I told folks that I was going to interview you, they were like, yeah, I really like her stuff. I followed and all that stuff. So I was super excited that other people were finding you as well and resonating with what you had to say. Um, so this is kind of a big question, but Mensa Mama had asked, "What is your opinion on the case in general?" So I don't know how you can encapsulate it, but
In general, I mean, so my personal thoughts are that like I find this case fascinating because I think it speaks to so many different levels of like society and power, and I love unpacking that. But in general, my thoughts on this case are that Blake Lively was upset that that people were sort of dragging her through the mud based off of her promotion of the film, based off of the wardrobe, based off of the things that we saw she exhibited. She could not understand or believe that people would naturally come to those conclusions on their own, and she wanted to get revenge for it. Like, it had to be some type of smear, it had to be some type of campaign, and I think the only reason that people care about this case at all is because of the sexual harassment elements, and if she had not alleged sexual harassment, one, she wouldn't be able to have a federal case at all, but two, nobody would care because a lot of the pro-lively side in responding to people who are not pro-lively is like, oh, you don't care about sexual harassment, you don't care about sexual harassment. So the sexual harassment acts as a thought terminating cliche and lends and allows people to basically say that if you don't believe that Blake Lively was sexually harassed, or if you believe that Blake Lively took over this film, that somehow you are some like sexist misogynist who does not
Mm,
believe women and does not think women are victimized. Or in my case, a lot of people like to say, "Oh, you just don't like her because she's a white woman," and it's like it's so ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. But the only reason you care about the case is because of the sexual harassment piece, and I think it's important that we critically engage in whatever allegations are or whatnot. And I also say that from the perspective of recognizing just how violently women are treated in society. Like, I'm not saying this as somebody who does not recognize how dangerous it is for women in society. I am a Black woman. like I'm constantly thinking about my positionality as a Black woman and what consequences those have. And so to frame this case all the way down to just like sexual harassment, and if you don't believe that Blake Lively was sexually harassed, that somehow means that you don't believe women, like you don't, like you're some like male-centered um misogynist, is crazy. So my high level overview of this case is that I think it's fascinating because it touches on a lot of things that are sort of prevalent in society, and in a way, it's like a low stakes way to engage in some of these topics. Like we can engage in the topic of like white feminism in a low stakes way because at the end of the day, like even like I don't believe that she was sexually harassed, but it's like sexual harassment is like a workplace sort of discrimination case. It's not something as serious as intimate partner violence, domestic violence, sexual assault, that sort of thing. So it's like a lower stakes engagement with these broader topics that I think people find fascinating. But I think at the end of the day, this is like a case about a woman who could not possibly believe that people would possibly find not like her off of her own behavior and that it had to be part of some larger organized campaign against her.
Yeah. No, I hear that. Um, uh, I have always felt to some degree that if we just liked her promo, we would not be here.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
so another person, Ronnie, had asked, "What do you think is the implications of the case for either party winning?"
Um, well, so I think so the reason why Justin Baldoni could even like take this case as far is because he really had nothing to lose. Like his name was getting dragged through the mud. So it's like he was sort of like it's only up from here. Blake Lively is sort of like it's only down from here. So so as far as implications, I feel like if Justin Baldoni wins, I don't know. I think he's a fascinating case because I don't know. I feel like I would not be surprised if his experience on this set and his experience with this case would lend to him like taking a huge step back and not necessarily engaging or like making films the way that he wants to or like collaborate, at least not in Hollywood in this big way anymore, which I think would be unfortunate because it does seem like to me he does give sort of very passion driven, but I wouldn't be surprised, especially seeing texts where he's like, yeah, this is like my family and my livelihood and da da da, and him saying like, oh yeah, I have like a small circle of friends. I think he said that in a Ryan Reynolds text message, like I'm not really in the Hollywood scene, so I would assume that he would even if he wins, I would not be surprised if he's like sort of retreated from media and stuff just because of that, or just because of the way that this whole case is shaking out. But maybe he could go the other way and be like, actually, I'm going to prove to y'all that I can persist despite what happened. If Blake Lively wins, I don't know. It's just like that feels so far out the realm of possibility that I don't know. Like, what are the implications of her winning? I guess it would depend on what she wins on. If she wins on like, oh, there's sexual harassment, but there's no retaliation, then I don't think that would really make that big of a difference. Like, I think pro Lively side would be vindicated. Like, oh yeah, he actually sexually harassed her. I don't know that I see there's a universe in which she wins on retaliation. I just think it's too much time between the things, and there's too much evidence and correspondence that sort of show her like plotting on him from the beginning. Um, yeah. But I think even if Blake Lively wins, I think she loses because regardless of the sexual harassment, she has shown herself to be such a terror on sets, that I don't think anybody would ever want to work with her again. Because you have Sony execs calling you a terrorist. Like, I don't know that there's anything that you could do to get past that. Um, yeah. I think they
Yeah.
sort of both lose at the end of the day in this case.
Well, people have talked a lot about um that there's harm to the Me Too movement or um her wanting to be the face of 47.1
Mhm,
uh and trying to test that law
mhm.
is kind of it does damage, right? Because
Yeah,
I think it to insist on being the face of 47.1
yeah.
with such a shaky ground. The reason so many amicus briefs came was because they didn't want that law to to be harmed, right? And
Mhm.
so even the first amicus brief that came in, when the person was responding to people on LinkedIn, she's like, "I'm not defending Blake Lively. I'm defending this law. I'm not
Yeah.
even saying that this pertains to Blake. I'm saying don't mess with this law." And so if she wins, is it helpful for the Me Too movement if she wins?
I don't know, like, I feel like it's giving Blake Lively too much power to have her have any type of like, to have this case have any relevance on, like, Me Too. Like, I think Yeah, like, I don't know. It I don't know, because it's like Me Too has based off of, like, just the current political moment that we're in, like, we're already severely, like, regressing on women's rights, believe women, Me Too, da, 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 like, we're already severely regressing on that. Um, I I feel like people could use Blake Lively as, if she I think especially if she were to lose, people could be like, "See, this is why we don't believe women," and I think that would be more harmful. If she were to win, it's like I feel like it would be less harmful per se, because then it's like, "Oh, she won on these cases or whatnot, like, this is a vindication for women or whatnot." As far as the, 47.1, like I said, I'm not a lawyer, but I think Not Actually Golden had a video sort of discussing it, and it's very, like, mixed reviews as far as, like, First Amendment protections, so I don't know that I have fully fleshed out formed thoughts about the law in general outside of this case, like, understanding the intentionality, but also I think it's like we have such high ideals as far as like the Constitution and what we want to set as parameters. And there's this constant balancing between what are our goals, but also how do we protect people in society? Which is like, because it's like we have First Amendment, like free speech, da da da. And then there's these very narrow carve outs where that's not acceptable. And so I think it does have to balance between like, what do we want in society? Like, what do we value freedom of speech, freedom of like religion, freedom or whatnot? And like what extent do we do that? And how do we try to create laws that protect freedom of speech while also limiting harm to people? And I think that is a very delicate balancing act.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. It was just an interesting thing from the first person who did the amicus brief saying, like, you need to throw it out at this early of a stage. And it was that question of like, well, what right do people have to defend themselves then?
Right.
Um,
Yes.
so yes,
And
I
I'm
definitely.
very wary, and I think especially knowing the history of, like I don't know if I reference Ida B. Wells' The Red Record in one of my videos, but it's like there is a long sort of history of, um, like, white terror, specifically through the victimization of through painting white women as victims of that being used to justify, like, lynchings. And that absolutely colors the way that I see this case and think about victimhood and what that means. And so I do think it is a very sort of slippery slope as far as like almost muzzling people from being able to defend themselves, but also while also understanding the ways that perpetrators of abuse can use the court system to harm people. And it's like we don't have strong, because something I've been thinking, or that I think I made a video a while back, as far as like even the idea of, because it's like a lawyer's job is to vigorously sort of defend their client, and when people are like going to court for like sexual assault, like I have thankfully never been a victim of sexual assault, but for women who do go to court or people who do go to trial, a lot of times people say it's extremely re-traumatizing, and part of it is because you're like the defense of the alleged perpetrator. Like, I do believe that everybody is entitled to legal representation. That's sort of like a tenet of our justice system, is everybody is entitled to legal representation. And it's like if your goal is to help your client win in court, that necessarily dictates like sort of requires re-traumatizing your victim. And I don't know how you solve that issue.
Mhm.
I don't know how you support a place of like we should have laws and everybody is entitled to defense and innocent until proven guilty, and your lawyer should like rigorously defend you while also protecting like people who are victims from being re-traumatized. I don't know if there's a way to have both of those things at the same time. And I don't know if we want to say like, well, actually people shouldn't be able to defend themselves for the sake of possibly re-traumatizing a victim. I don't know how we balance those competing things.
And I mean, that is that real rub, right? The I mean, you're right. I don't know if there's anything that currently exists that doesn't like harm one side's ability to really present a full picture of like of what may have happened. Ugh. And if and as I'm saying that, it almost like feels difficult to say that because then it sounds like people are like, so you think that the perpetrator should have, kind of, and
Right.
that is the like that's the rub because we don't know yet.
Right, and it's like, fundamentally, I do think that even if somebody is guilty, that they are entitled to legal defense. I
Yeah.
do. I
Yeah.
do, but I also think, and I don't think I've ever said this, but, like, I sort of do tend towards, like, abolition, and this thinking about, like, policing and prisons in general, um, I think we sort of need to reconceptualize and reframe justice, and, like, I don't know that anybody has all of the answers for this, but I think part of the problem is that because we live in a punitive justice system, that one, especially if you have cases that could end up with people, like, in prison for multiple years of life or death penalty or whatever, like, you better have that right, and I sort of take the position that we shouldn't have the death penalty at all, like, I think it's just too dangerous to put the ability of, like, taking somebody's life into the hands of the state, and there's so much that could go wrong with that, but just thinking about, like, punishment, like, what does it mean to have, what does it mean to hold somebody accountable for harming other people? I think part of the issue is, like, we sort of need to take an entire step back and, like, reconceptualize our ideas of what does, like, restitution and, accountability look like, and can we have that without it being punitive? Because I think if we came from a place of not necessarily automatically making everything punitive, that would change a lot of our understandings or like what we think of as justice. Because, for example, in cases of sexual assault, if like a lot of people go to prison and get sexually assaulted. So if you're saying if like it's a thing of somebody needs to go to jail because they sexually assaulted somebody, and this because sexual assault is terrible, it's a crime, but then you put them in an environment that opens them up to the risk of that happening to them there. So I think in general, like we have to sort of reframe our conceptions of justice and what accountability looks like when I studied abroad in Rwanda, almost 2 summers ago now, and there was the Rwandan genocide back in, I think, 1994 when I was there. It was the 30th anniversary, and we went to the, genocide museum in Kigali and stuff, and it was like the genocide was so horrific, and you
Mm.
had friends killing each other and families killing each other, and there was so many people who participated that it was like not feasible to put everybody in prison. So then they had to sort of come up with new ways of like healing and justice and accountability. And part of that for some people was like if you participated and like harmed somebody, like you had to come in front of the community and apologize. And it was like a lot of things. So I think there are other ways that we can expand our ideas of accountability and of justice and whatnot beyond just like punishment. And I think it would lead to a healthier society in general, but that's sort of outside the frame of this case.
Well, you know what? One of the first questions asked in the first episode of this series is, what does justice look like?
Uh-huh.
And I and that's the one question that like sits with me that I almost feel like maybe that should be my fourth question or fifth question or whatever I have that is just stationary because it is interesting to hear like people say justice for Justin and it's like but
Mhm,
what does justice look like?
mhm.
What would that entail? But you know and that's the beauty, I think, also of pop culture conversations, right?
Yeah.
You're like, this is adjacent somehow into this, but it is an opening, right?
Mhm.
Most pop culture conversations open deeper conversations because
Absolutely.
people are like, oh, it's almost a bridge
Mhm.
to some degree because there usually is some deeper underlying
Yeah,
conversation to be had in pop culture.
yeah.
But so when people are like, "Oh, it's just surfacey," well,
It's
if you
it's
stay
never
there,
it's never just surface, and I do wanna
yeah,
say, like, 'cause, I listened to Judge, Ketanji Jackson's memoirs. She talks about sort of, like, ethical frameworks and how that impacts people's perception of the law, and I think that that's another thing that's important to consider is sort of, like, how do you Like, what values are important to society, and how do you want to structure the law to reflect those values? Because at the end of the day, like, these are all made up things. um and I think she gives this case of, like, some murder that happened on an, Native American, like, reservation or something, and it was just, like, the structure like, the laws within the reservation were different than the laws like, federal laws, and I'm just trying to remember it, so don't quote me. But it was sort of like, within the reservation, like, the protection of the community was more important than, like, necessarily individual punishment, and so I think it was some case in which, some guy did something to hurt somebody else and, like, the guy, basically murdered him. Um, but it was, like, sort of fine for the community or whatever. They had, like, their own community punishment, but, like, the guy wasn't gonna go to jail. But the US federal government wanted the guy to be, like, sentenced and put in prison. And so it became this thing of, like, like, the rights of, like, reservations versus, like, the federal government and stuff. But she was sort of speaking to, like, ethical frameworks and how ethical frameworks inform what we even value and how those values get translated into society. So it's sort of like, do you care more about the consequences, like what impact did this have on a community, or do you care more about the action itself? Like murder is wrong, so therefore you must punish somebody who murdered, versus what are the consequences of this murder on the community? And I think that's also something that's at least important to have in the back of your mind is like, what ethics and values do you uphold, and how does that shape how you think about the law and think about justice or punishment or accountability?
Yeah. Oh, that's a lot to chew on, really, to think about it. And it's interesting too because so obviously these are like deeper stuff. Like,
Yeah.
and one of the things that always happens in this case, right, is we remind people that this is a civil case and not a criminal
Yes.
case, and
Yes.
it's not about guilt and innocent, and
And
yet
yes.
that's the wording. So I was like, I can't get away from the conversations of guilt and
Right.
innocence because
Mhm.
even though it's a civil case, it's about being liable or not liable.
Yeah.
People are still using that language, and there's some even in the hearing that they had, them trying to almost switch it out and
Mhm.
make it be like something that she was never claiming in the beginning.
Yeah.
Um, and so I guess my question then is, um, how do you think what you said something about, like, the communal aspect of
Mhm.
some folks, how they resolve things, is the communal aspect. What do you think resolution could look like? Like, a meaningful resolution that does think about, like, the world well, not the world, well, actually, it's been the world. I mean, but it's more so in the U actually, they've done things, to show that this has been big in the United States and big in, like, Canada. Which
Mhm.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, but people are watching. And like, what lessons are we gonna learn from this when this is all over? Like, what is the is there a resolution or it's just it gets done and people just is it do we just get left with like nothing to close up on? Or maybe not maybe so,
I
but
feel like we probably will leave with nothing to close up on, because I think as far as like the communal aspect, like you sort of have to be in community with people, right? And I think that's the other thing is like even thinking about accountability, like you can only hold people accountable that you are sort of in community with. Like I can't hold a stranger on the internet accountable. Like I can say something mean to them, blah blah blah, but like at the end of the day, I can't hold them accountable. So as far as like resolution between like Justin Baldoni and Blake Lively or whatnot. First of all, I think they would both have to be open to that. So I think as far as like the community aspect, it has to be mutual between people that they acknowledge that they are in part of the same community and they want to maintain that community. And I think that's why as far as like community being an aspect of this case, I don't know that that would ever happen because these are not people who are like in community with each other or even give the impression that they would ever want to be, because I think they have fundamental disputes that I don't know that they would ever resolve, because like Blake Lively fundamentally wants somebody to blame for the fact that she was getting drugged through the mud on social media, and she wants that person to be Justin Baldoni. Justin Baldoni fundamentally is like, I'm not responsible. Like, yeah, I hired Crisis PR because I was concerned about my reputation, but we did not do anything to smear you. So it's like she wants somebody to say, I smeared, or she wants somebody to blame for smearing, and Justin Baldoni's like, I didn't smear you. So it's like those are fundamentally incompatible goals and desires. So I don't know that they would ever have some resolution in which they would be like cool. Like I think they would just go their own ways, never like each other again, never work on any projects with each other again, and move on. But I think it's sort of like anything in a broader sense, like there's some level of social contract that you agree to as a member of society. We exist in a society. There's some level of social contract that you agree to, and that social contract sort of means agreeing to some level of like whatever consequences the society puts on you. And I think that could be a slippery slope. But it's like we, by existing as members of this society, we are partaking in a social contract.
Which is actually quite interesting because people have said, because I've asked, like, what if this happens? And, you know, I did, I wrote a song in regards to like, the question was around like, God, is she going to get away with this?
Hmm.
Um, because I'm like, there was just that moment of like, my word, she might not ever be held accountable for how things went down. She may never take ownership, even though she
Yeah.
wants authorship. But she may not take ownership of any of those things. But people responded in the comments section, well, trial and all of this stuff is not the only place where accountability, or not necessarily accountability, like you said. You can't hold technically people accountable that you don't have relationship with. But
Hmm.
like there are consequences that
Yeah.
people feel like they could administer on their side. I will
Oh
never
yeah.
watch your movie. I will never,
Yeah.
X, Y, and Z. And
Hmm.
so just that piece of it came into my brain as you were sharing.
Yeah.
Now, I know that one of the things I did want to speak to you on was your thoughts around white feminism and how it plays a part in this conversation, and your own perspective and your own um, take on it.
Yeah. I think the white feminism aspect is so fascinating because sort of like to me, white feminism, especially like thinking about sort of the history of feminism in general, is like white feminism was very much geared towards wealthy white women. It didn't even include poor white women who were outside their houses. Like it was mostly like sort of wealthy white women who were oppressed by their husbands, like were sort of responsible for taking care of the house and the kids, didn't have much like, well, I guess like they were secure financially, but they had very limited scopes of like power and like autonomy and stuff like that. And so sort of the goals of like white feminism to me are to reach that same sort of level of equal level of power with wealthy white men. And that's it. Whereas my definition of feminism is the bell hooks definition of feminism, which sort of paraphrase it, but she basically says like feminism is a struggle to end sexist oppression. To me, white feminism is not about ending sexist oppression. It's about guaranteeing a certain class and status of white women the same level of power, access, wealth, and resources as wealthy white men. And I think that is a fundamental distinction. And that's something that's sort of throughout all of these text messages, throughout the engagement of behavior, even in people's defense of Blake Lively. It's like they are making it a feminist statement that she took control over this film because men have been in power and in control of films as directors. So therefore, it was feminist of her to like take control and power because now she's exhibiting the same behavior as rich white men. And I find that extremely frustrating. One, because it does nothing for the broader broader dynamic of women. Like it does nothing about the gender, like the level of gender-based violence and oppression that women in general face. It just says that this class of women who already are the most protected and privileged in society despite their own oppression within their relationships or whatnot, you still already have higher power and access like than a single mom who has to work multiple hours and has no choice, um who can't just hire nannies or can't have time to like play chess about whether or not this man is being misogynistic because he did not really express enough passion about your edits to his script, like, or to the script that he helped co-write. And so it's this very like girl bossy, like, look at me, I'm sticking it to the man, because I'm by behaving like a man. It's a very like lean in, oh, women can do what men can do. And it's like it only belongs to a certain class of white women. But it does nothing to dismantle the overall systems of oppression that lead to women not being oppressed by men within society. Um, yeah, and I think but then like feminism also has a certain level of like victimhood. And I think about this a lot with Taylor Swift. Like, it's been something that's been very fascinating to me. The level of, you have this wealth and privilege and power and access, but you still harp on the fact, like, you're still sort of feel victimized by the white men that were there sort of at the start of your career despite being a billionaire. It's fascinating. It's fascinating to me. This is just like sheer inability to like accept that. But then you take also these arguments of like, oh, these other people don't see my power. So it's like a certain level of irony of, oh, I'm being oppressed by these men despite all of my wealth, access, and resource. But part of my oppression is that these people don't recognize the level of power that I have. I find it fascinating. So like the levels of like white feminism is it's very interesting. But I think especially thinking like, what do we consider liberation? Like, because to me, liberation is not like Blake Lively winning this case has no regards on any other woman, in my opinion. like I just think that gives her too much power. But it's like, whoa, white woman becoming a CEO of a company says nothing about women not having access to reproductive health care. It says nothing about women about us not having strong enough social safety nets for moms and children. Like, it says nothing about us not having universal health care. Like, it does nothing for the vast majority of women, but it becomes a celebration because look at me, I'm proving myself against these other wealthy white men. And so it's very limiting, and it only helps a very small specific subset of people, and it does not even apply to all women, let alone like all white women. Because a woman in Appalachia living in the mountains is gonna be like, who is Blake Lively?
You know what's really interesting too is that whole conversation that started happening around around who has more people of color supporting a side, and people are like, well, you have your algorithm showing you only people of this particular race. You only
Yeah.
are all only seeing all white people because that's what your algorithm is
Shows,
showing
yeah.
you. And then actually there are other people supporting Blake Lively that is, not white at all. And there are, I've seen
Yeah.
a handful. And so, but why do you think that conversation has come to the forefront?
Well, I think because it sort of speaks to the racial dynamics of the case, or in general. Yeah, because the algorithm part is interesting, and I have been thinking about like the black women, because like the black women that I've sort of seen who don't believe Blake Lively, they make one video and then they move on. They're just like, yeah, I don't believe didn't believe this case for this reason, da da da, and then they move on. Because I feel like for a lot of black women, and I don't know if this applies to like other non-black women of color, but for a lot of black women, like, we sort of recognize this behavior. Like, we have dealt with this like behavior, that like the level of sort of passive aggressive manipulation, but then like self-victimization and stuff like that. Like, that is not new behavior for a lot of black women. So it almost feels like like it's very like, okay, we can acknowledge it and move on. And that's been a lot of videos I've seen where people might make one video and they're like, yeah, I saw this Blake Lively case and these are my thoughts. I don't think she was sexually harassed. I think this is like the same sort of behavior that I'm used to seeing. And then they say their thoughts and they move on. I do admit I have seen a couple of like more pro Blake Lively sides, but then it'll be like, oh, if you support Blake Lively or don't support Blake Lively, you also support like Chris Brown and da da da. It becomes so like intellectually dishonest. um, But as far as I can't think of somebody who makes consistently supportive, like, Blake Lively content that's not a white woman. I can't think of anybody who does, like, they have, like, a lot of videos about it. Um, but yeah, I think the race aspects are fascinating, but I do think there might be a certain assumption that if a Black woman or if a non-white woman is supporting Blake Lively, then it lends credibility to Blake Lively's case. And it allows you to have somebody to point to be like, oh, well, there's this Black woman who believes Blake Lively, so or something like that. Um, but I think it's my opinion is that everything in America comes down to race. Everything in America comes down to race and racism, and this case is no exception.
And so when you dwindle it down, what
Mhm.
can can you explain to someone how you're seeing that?
Seeing the race or
Yeah,
seeing
like how when it dwindles down to it, how are you seeing it play out?
well, I mean, of course, like people have obviously talked about the Jamie Heath aspect, like the sort of racist undertones of saying, "Oh, he's running this case like a barbecue." And people have mentioned the toilet paper thing. I have not really repeated that because I haven't seen the thing that people are referencing. But if she did ask Jamie Heath, who is the CEO of Wayfair, to get her toilet paper, that is very clearly a racist microaggression because there's no way you would ask any other white CEO to bring you toilet paper. Like, you have to assume a certain level of like, oh, I'm over you despite you being the CEO of the studio that I'm working for, because I'm a white woman and you're a Black man. As far as like the Justin Baldoni, because and this is very controversial, because Justin Baldoni is a white man, but to me, he is like an ethnically ambiguous white man. And I do think that could play a role because, and when I say ethnically ambiguous, because people will inevitably be like, Justin Baldoni is a white man. Justin Baldoni is a white man. I'm like, let me be clear. Justin Baldoni is a white man. I do not disagree that Justin Baldoni is a white man. When I say ethnically ambiguous, I mean that he could be somebody that could be like Latino or Middle Eastern or whatnot, who would also in those groups, like you could like somebody who's Middle Eastern, North African, and something else, they would be considered white on the US census. And a lot of Hispanic people would also be considered racially white in the US. That does not change the fact that they get treated differently despite their racial status and classification being white. They still get treated differently based off of their phenotype and how they look. And so to me, it's not outside of the realm of possibility that Justin Baldoni, part of the way that Blake Lively treated him is because she saw him as a lower tier of whiteness. Like if we think of whiteness as a hierarchy, because it's like end of the day, race is a social construct and it changes. And so in whiteness itself, like we often don't talk about whiteness as a construct, but it is a construct, especially in America. Like to become white in America, you have to like erase your other ethnic identities. You have to like you're not German and English and da da da. Like people would say that when they do their like ethnicity DNA test, they're like, oh, I'm like German, English, da da da. But at the end of the day, you're white because like whiteness in America inherently means erasing the culture and cultural background that you have to be consumed into whiteness. And there is a hierarchy that is also very much also very much inspired the Nazis as far as like the waspy type whiteness of like the standard of like blonde hair, blue eye, like that is a blonde hair, blue eye white people are overrepresented in media. So it's like on the hierarchy of whiteness, Justin Baldoni is lower than Blake Lively, who is this blonde hair. I think she's blue eyed. This blonde hair, blue eyed, skinny white woman. Like so, to me, it's not outside of the realm of possibility that despite Justin Baldoni being a white man, that him being phenotypically ethnically ambiguous would not play a role in how Blake Lively saw him and interacted with him.
I will say in talking about tiers of whiteness, there for like diversity hires,
Mhm.
folks with red hair.
Yeah.
Now obviously that's people with red hair are not all white. I want to be
Right.
clear, I know that. But I'm just saying that typically when you do see a white person with red hair,
Mhm.
it's was considered a diversity hire because of meeting that diversity hire. And so it always affected me every time I watched a show now where there's like I was like,
That
"Oh
one red
yeah,
hair.
there's somebody with red hair or whatever," because it was just not represented very often.
Yeah.
I mean, often so you would see a you know So that's just what I
Yeah,
thought.
and
And then
it's
it made
fast.
me think about TikTok's
Yeah.
trend, you know?
Yeah, and it's
Mm.
fascinating because even, like, amongst Black people, we say that, like, hair color is like colorism amongst white people, like, you have, like, blonde hair, you have brunettes, and then you have red hair, and, like, there's, like, a whole colorism aspect amongst white people as far as hair color, and it's like their
Oh,
colorism is the hair color, and so,
I mean,
hair
I
and
can kinda
eye
see
color.
that.
Hair and eye color, because I just, like, sometimes I be in white people business, and like, even, like, in shades of blondness, like, as far as, like, oh, being a dirty blonde versus a brunette or like, it's very fascinating, but it just speaks to, like, even within whiteness itself, even amongst white people, there are hierarchies of what is most acceptable, most beautiful versus what is not, and so it's not outside of the realm of possibility that this could influence some of the behaviors and interactions that took place between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, despite Justin Baldoni being a white man. I want to be clear. I recognize that Justin Baldoni is a white man. I'm just saying race is not logical. It's not based in any like biological reality or fact. It's a social construct, and the social construct influences people's interactions with each other.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually I'm not gonna expound too much, but I actually had a person comment on the video I had talking about Justin
Mhm.
and him being a white man and just the history of like Italian folks coming in
Yeah.
and how like historically, because they were able to immigrate, I mean, that aspect of whiteness was available to them, but like
Mhm.
societally speaking, how
Yeah.
they experienced life here in America, it took a
Mhm.
while to be like put in. And some folks don't still see themselves as white folks because
Mhm.
you're right, whiteness, you get rid of your culture, your heritage, your language, everything.
Mhm.
And many Italian folks do not choose to do
Yeah.
that. Like I love to play bocce. That's why my name is Bocce Go
Yeah.
Hawks, and bocce is an Italian sport. And so I
Mhm.
have many wonderful Italian folks around me, and their culture is such a big part
Mhm.
of their existence. But yes, Justin Baldoni sees himself as a white man, and he's
Oh, yeah.
talked about experiencing white privilege. But
Mhm.
there is that aspect of if someone doesn't know,
Yeah.
and they're just seeing somebody. What is that experience? But I had a great comment from a person, and we were able to go back and forth around the indigenous folks
Mhm.
and the whole statement around
Ooh.
race as a social
Yeah.
construct and what that
Mhm.
could mean about erasure of indigenous folks and
Yeah.
all these different things. So we're I'm planning to have a new series that surrounds comment creators because I love
Mhm.
comment creators. They're amazing. They make videos a lot of fun. People end up staying on your videos a lot more because they're reading your their comments.
Mhm.
So that individual, once we're ready to do a video, is going to be sharing a different aspect or thought
Mhm.
around just from an indigenous
Yeah.
perspective. And so
Yeah.
I'm excited for that
Yeah.
conversation.
I think it'd be interesting.
um, yeah, so, but I just wanted to bring that in because it reminded me of, like, the back and forth that we had in
Mhm.
the comment section of that one video.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so many things, and I already looked at the time. How did the time go so
I
quickly?
know, I
But
was
it
looking at
has,
it.
and I had more questions, honestly, it's amazing to talk to you, Dedicated Yapper, because there's so much more I would love to unpack with you and to hear more from you, and I hope you get opportunities if you want them, to
Mhm.
have opportunities to talk in other people's, like, lives or
Yeah.
things that they're doing because I think it would be a rich conversation. With that said, just remind folks again where to find you so they can follow you.
Dedicated Yapper on TikTok. That's it so far.
And hopefully someday YouTube. No, just kidding. I still keep pushing for that, but right now only TikTok,
Right
folks,
now on
only
TikTok.
TikTok. And
Yeah.
I just wanted to let folks know my next regularly scheduled 17 questions with Bocce is going to be on Friday. And
Mhm.
so that one will be with Carol of Docket Updates fame. So
Okay.
again, if you have any questions for Carol, make sure to make put it in the comment section somewhere so I can gather those. But hopefully you enjoyed this episode with Dedicated Yapper and that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.